Hi guys, I'm just about to do the second part of prep on this drinks cabinet, which means I've done all the cleaning, so I've sort of swept it all out, I've scrubbed it all clean with a degreaser, and now I'm about to start on the sanding part. So always in that order when I do it. I've tried it other ways around, I usually get caught out, especially with masking tape. Masking tape's really going to challenge your finish when you pull it up, so your prep has to be bang on, more than with any other application really, because usually just putting more on top. But with masking tape you're actually challenging it quite early on in its curing process by pulling it off. So you might also be able to see, I don't know if you can see, that I've also done some filling. I've filled some little cracks just to give it a smoother finish. That's currently drying. I've just done that in a little video if you want to see how I did it. And then I'll sand that down when that's dry in about 30 minutes or so. It's quite a rapid drying one. So I'll start on sanding the rest of it first to get it ready. This particular cabinet's going to be two different finishes, effectively. We're going to have a painted exterior, so it's going to have the top and sides, and then all these individual areas here, and the bottom and the legs will be painted, fully painted. So I will prep those ready for painting in one way. And then all of this here, which is all the drawers and the doors from the cabinet, are going to be stripped completely. So I'll do that in another little video. I'll set those away a little bit later to get the paint completely off, and that's where the design's going to go. So it's going to go in bronze over the natural wood. So firstly, to prep the cabinet ready to paint, so what I need to do is I need to grab some sandpaper, obviously, and because I work with Fusion, I don't need to take it right off. I don't need to, and I'm not going to go straight over the finish that's there. I'm going to give it a really good key for the paint to grip to. If you paint over the finish, really just asking for trouble later on, because it could just start to flake off. So I really want to give it a really good basis for the paint to stick. But I only need to give it what's called a deglossing sand, or a scuff sand is another way of calling it. Fusion's really grippy, but you do need to open up that finish a little bit to give it something to grip to. And that's quite nice and easy to do. I may need to give parts of this a little bit more attention with a slightly different sandpaper, where it might be a bit rougher. So the really smooth, glossy parts are the bits where I want to give it the scuff sand, and then I may need to give it a bit more attention around the edges, where it's just had a bit more of a battering and the finish has broken a bit. I might need to smooth that. Effectively, my rule of thumb is anything you can feel with your fingers will effectively probably show through paint. So I know I'm pretty sure I felt the same way too. The feeling that you can put paint over and it will fill the gaps, and then you can sort of continue over the top. Not really, especially with a water-based paint like Fusion. You put on in thin coats. Anything that's you can feel it, you're going to be able to see it through. So those deeper scratches, we're going to need to sort those out. Now to do a scuff sand, I'm going to use a 180 grit sandpaper. So that's a fine sandpaper. So it looks like that. 180. And this is, I get this on a really big roll, like this. Really big rolls from Screwfix, or I think Homebase and B&Q both do them, but I like these ones because these are sort of really nice quality ones. This one's Flexovit. I can't remember the name of the one, but there's another brand that I get which is green. And why I like them is also you cut them to size, great for workshops as well, but I can also put that on the back of my little Makita sander, got a little orbital sander which has clips that takes bits of sandpaper. So the good thing for me is it doesn't mean buying two sets of sanding stuff. So we're going to be hand sanding, so it's a good old trusted cork block. This is the first one I bought, I think, when I first started upcycling, so, and there's nothing wrong with it. I think it's only about 60p. One thing to note, it's got two curved edges and two straight edges. Make sure to wrap your paper so that the curved edges are inside. If you put the straight edges flat down, you find that you end up with the paper here pushing more down, and you're going to get sort of grooves that you don't really want, or scratches that might be uneven. So by folding it round the rounded way, we get a nice flat surface when we push down. That helps us keep a nice even sort of stroke when we're sanding as well. So I want to use this wrapped cork block, pushing it across the surface of the wood in the direction of the grain. So the grain is the configuration or the pattern you can see in the wood And you want to follow that, because then the grit on the paper will go through the fibres of the wood, and it will take the finish away, but won't cause any scratches. If you go across the way, you're actually effectively creating little scratches in those fibres that run the lengthways down this particular piece of wood, which looks unattractive. So everything we do, we want to be kind of doing it in sort of flow with the grain, so that everything looks harmonious together. So I'm going to do that. So watch when you're doing it, keep your hand going up and down. So sometimes it's quite natural to curve. So watch what you're doing. You're doing it, I find. And then so now it gets filled up with dust quite quickly, so I'll just give it a little smack to get dust off, because it's not finished yet, that bit's sandpaper. Then I tend to pull away the dust. Now, I should say, I would have a mask on, were it not for this being a little bit of a video, so it's a really good idea to get yourself a good mask if you do a lot of sanding. I often do this outside as well, but it's raining and I'm shooting a video, so we're inside. So hopefully you can see there, do a little bit more, just to sand out those scratches that I just put in. And all I'm trying to do, exactly as the expression says, is degloss. I'm trying to get the shine off. I'm trying to get it dull, so if I do that, you should be able to see the difference. I'll just hold that up in the light. You can see the difference between the two. So this is the shiny finish and this is the dull. So, and I often move around it to check, because this is where masking tape will catch you out. You really need to look for all the shiny bits and give them a go over. Right, so any shiny bits potentially is where your paint's not going to stick, and that could cause you problems if you're doing a masking tape finish, but at any finish really, that's the bit that's sort of susceptible to being sort of knocked and then flaking off. Okay? So, I'm going to do that all over. If I want to do the edges, I'll just get a little bit of paper like this. Actually, I need to go down because I need to go in the direction of the grain there. It's not such a big deal. It's going to get painted over for little areas where you don't see. So just go down like that, just to get into there. And then obviously down the side again. You can actually turn it onto its side, so then you can push a little bit better. Just all over like that. Keep wiping away the dust so you can see if you've got any shiny patches that you've missed, and you get the sand out. You should be able to get it out quite a bit until it finally gets clogged up. Now, if you find it's clogging and you're not getting much purchase on it at all, and it's not sort of taking the surface off, that's what I was talking about in the other prep video, is where you may have a waxed finish and that starts to melt and it just clogs your sandpaper and you get big blobs of wax in your sandpaper. So it's worth going back to the first stage of prep, getting some white spirit out and using a scrubby and just trying to break down that finish, then clean it and then come back to sand, and you should find you've got a finish that you can start to get the sandpaper into. Again, it's one of those that until you start tackling it, you might not know what the finish is. So it's a little bit of suck it and see, going through the stages, but we want to make sure that we've got a nice surface to paint on. So that's my deglossing, but I do have some scratches that need a little bit more attention, a bit deeper, which I can actually feel with my finger. So I'm going to switch up. I'm going to go from the 180. So these are the three that I keep in my workshop all the time. I've got 180, 120 and 60. So the difference being I get more and more coarse. So we've got, let's just change that one over. Maybe it's gone. Okay. So, yeah, so fine, medium fine, you can see there, and then coarse. So this could be an 80, it doesn't have to be a 60 necessarily. But those are three I use all the time. The only other thing I use is synthetic sanding pads for sanding finishes. So, but this is just the only ones that I use on wood itself to get it ready, or finishes to get them ready to be painted. Just to explain the numbers, you kind of wonder where they come from. The larger grit, that means there's less particles on there, of course, because they're bigger. So 60, so it's 60. 120, obviously there's slightly more particles because they're a little bit bigger, and then even more because that's really fine, 180. So this gives us a really nice fine scuff sand, and it doesn't leave us any major scratches. From whereas a 120 will, but it will attack those deeper scratches for us because it's got more grit on it. So that's what I need to go and get some of those bits of uneven finish smoothed. But that will then leave me with some heavier scratches, which I don't want to start to paint over. So I'll then finish with a rub over with the 180. So I'll always end with 180. So if I go to 120 to get rid of some unevenness, I'll then finish up with this. So we have to just sort of go through the grits. Now the 60 I usually use to remove a finish completely. So if you need to get rid of, like if you want to get paint off completely, or if you want to take the varnish off completely, or there's some really flaky bits and you just need to get it right down so it's smooth, I use a 60. But then again, that's going to create some really big scratches. So we have to use the next size of grit to deal with those scratches and smooth them, and then progressively up to 180. It's just how it goes. So remember those three. I find those the most useful to have in my workshop all the time. So I'm going to go to 120. Same technique. Piece, just wrap it around your cork block, and then I'm going to attack those little bits where it's got scratches that the 180 won't get down to. And so I can just go to those spots. And I don't want to get this whole finish off, but I do want it to feel smooth, and I'll often just test it with my fingers. Obviously you can see visually as well. And sometimes you might get a little spot that will go down to the wood when you're doing it, which is fine. But as I'm doing this, you see deeper scratches appearing where I'm trying to smooth, which is why I then need to go to the finer paper to smooth that out before I finish. There's nothing there. Just tackle him. Obviously, stripping the surface off completely with a paint stripper or an electric sander would solve that problem completely, but there's no need for us to at some point. We can just do this to smooth it and finish it, then that's great. I tend to do this with hand sanding because I find that electric sanders bounce quite a lot on finishes when you want to do them on 180, just a scuff sand. I think they're better for taking the finish off completely. That's just my experience. I'm not saying I'm an expert with electric sanders, but also a lot of the furniture do is veneer, and so we don't really want to go too rapidly because we might go through the veneer, and it's very, very hard to do that with hand sanding. I personally think both take as long as each other, so it's not any quicker, it's just less effort to use a sander. So it's a good little thing to have, a cork block. It doesn't cost you much, and you can do all the jobs. So that's a quick run through of what I do with those three different kinds of sandpaper. Then run to paint. I'm going to grab my tack cloth. This is a tack cloth. It's basically a resin or oil impregnated rag, which comes like this. This one's by Prodec. So it actually comes like that. So you can, somebody else who doesn't like tack cloths up there. And then you can keep turning it and finding fresh surfaces. You keep opening it out like this. And this is brilliant for getting up that fine dust that I've just created and giving me a surface that's ready to paint. I don't want to wet that, especially if I've got fresh wood there. I don't want to raise the grain, but I do want to get that fine dust off. I'm not going to rub, I'm just going to mop. You don't want to rub any of the resins or oils down. I'm just going to mop over. If you've used a heavy grit sandpaper, use a hooper first before this, just to get the big bits of wood off, but I'm just going to go around and do that. Ready to paint. And I think we'll end it there because the heavens are just open, so I'll see you in the painting video.